The following segment is sponsored by Daniel A. White and Associates.
The Rick Jensen Show on 101.7 FM, 1150 AM, WDEL, and streaming to your smart speaker and mobile device.
Well, many of you, like myself, planning for retirement. You got your 401k or IRAs or whatever. Maybe a combination of things, maybe some investment real estate and such, which I had done in the past, and the markets and investing. Now, I'm very fortunate that I do have some guaranteed money with Dan White. Thank goodness. I've been a long-time happy camper client of this guy, and he's just brilliant. In fact, he works with some brilliant people as well, hence Dan White and Associates. You can give him a call at 888-690-8820. Doesn't cost you anything to sit down and chat with these brilliant people. But when I bring this up because, well, of course, Wednesday after 1:30, we always have a conversation and a tip from one of the members of Dan White and Associates. Today it's Andrew Wood, brilliant guy, a lot of fun. But I wanted to mention this because, I read a lot of analyses and business reports and such. Last week, I was reading about Micron. And there were a lot of analysts saying, oh, my gosh, these guys should be doing very, very well this year. It might be a good idea to be investing in it. I thought, okay, I'm going to do a little more reading on this. And I was doing a little more reading on this because I just don't jump into something quickly. And while I was, it went up 19%. And I thought, all right, well, missed that one. No. There's probably some more growth in the company and all, but I just feel like, you don't want to buy high and then sell low. And then there's a number of different other stocks as well, one of which went up something like another 17%. But it's a smaller company. And I thought, well, this is interesting. I'll look at these guys. No, today it comes down 17%. So, again, a lot of these companies are tied in with AI, and it feels like that whole dot-com bubble. Where these companies are coming out and they're going through the IPOs, and then they get a bunch of funding, they go up in price, and then they crash back down. Which is why it's a good idea to talk to a guy like Andrew Wood because, he's in the game for the long run and is on the phone right now with some good advice. Andrew, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Rick. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're there. So now you know what my last week was like when I was looking at the markets like, whatever. A big ugh, What's on your mind today?
It's crazy what is going on right now, I think. But I also know that, people are looking for a little bit, at least more security and peace of mind as they approach retirement. I'll ask you this, but I feel like majority of the people that I know, not even client related, but just people that I know, the goal is usually to, work, put in your time, and try to retire as early as possible. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Early as possible, right? So
yeah. Although I admit that, look, I'm an old guy, but I love what I do, and I still have the energy and the capacity to do it. And then I won't mention any names, but when I start losing it, I hope they'll say, "Okay, Jensen, you go."
Oh man, you just walked right into it. But so there's actually a movement. It's called the Financial Independence Retire Early, so FIRE, FIRE.
Okay.
And ultimately, the focus there is to save aggressively, invest, build enough wealth so you can become financially independent and retire basically as early as possible, which I feel like is kind of a goal for the majority of people, right? But there might be some pitfalls with that. And there was a report that I was just reading, just came out April of this year from the National Bureau of Economic Research.
I love this guy.
And they found among Americans, ages 51 to 64, leaving employment was linked to measurable cognitive decline.
Ugh.
Wow. Yeah. So, I think what it really boils down to is I think, at some point, we always look at as retirement as being the reward, right? I mean, you work hard, you sacrifice, and you put in your time, and this is a reward. But things you do need to look out for.
Well, my job, my job though is I like to joke and say, my job is just basically being mental. But it's mental exercises is what I engage in every single day of my life.
And that's the other thing too. I mean, I think the quote's like, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
Which obviously is part of that. But I think this really gets into, it's not that retiring it shouldn't be the goal. It's not saying you shouldn't retire. But what it's saying is, we should be careful in terms of retirement and not just dive in and abruptly end employment. It doesn't say you keep your max load, work life where you're, under a ton of stress and, potential burnout and that type of thing. It doesn't say you should stay in that type of environment, but, there are things that you can do to help kind of bridge or transition into retirement. And they actually talk about a number of them, but, obviously you want to keep mentally active. Yeah. There are some free college and community classes that people take, and they do kind of recommend doing those types of things. Volunteering, maintaining social connection. I have a number of friends and clients that do, volunteer around here. Even my parents, they live down south, but they researched some kind of old historic church, and now they do tours.
Nice.
For free, because it's so that they get to talk to people and tell them their stories and that type of thing.
I'm glad to hear that. Let me interject here, because I know of, and they're no longer with us, but I know of people, especially my dad's. Now my dad has passed, but people that my dad knew and other folks who were like in their 65, 67, they retired, and that was it. And then not long after, within a year or so, they died that young. And the consensus amongst family members and friends was that there were guys who deeply identified with what they did for a living. Their job was their identity. And then when they left that, there wasn't anything there for them. They drink whiskey, eat ice cream, and watch baseball, and then their health just deteriorated. I mean, it's not unlike, for a different reason, a couple's been married for 60 years, and then one of them, the wife passes away, and then the guy is gone. He dies within a few months, 3 or 4 or 5 months.
Or vice versa.
Yeah, and vice versa. And I know stories. I know people here in Delaware that this has happened to. And I wonder if there is some sort of psychological similarity then. Getting back to your point, though, I want to get back into what you were talking about, because it just stimulated this memory of mine, in that I know of guys, and it was all men, who identified so strongly with their jobs that within about a year or two, they just died, and they shouldn't have, because they were not even 70 years old yet. So what you're saying about your parents being docents at an old church and keeping yourself mentally active, that strikes a chord.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I can see a difference just with their mental health, obviously, but even physical health. They seem like they're always in a much better mood. Now, I talk to them all the time, but they do live down south, so I don't get to see them.
Yeah, are you sure it's a church thing, or the fact that you're not nearby annoying them anymore?
Yeah.
Wow, you're taking it seriously. Wow, I thought it was a joke.
But no, I do think, obviously, there's physical health, there's mental health, but a lot of mental health.
Yeah,
especially for retirees, this has to do with having a purpose, even if it is just grandkids. Hanging around your grandkids and seeing them as much as possible. I mean, there's lots of different things that you can do. I mean, this even brings up like studying music, playing strategy games. I can tell you, I have a grandmother that lived. She died right before COVID. She was, I think, 99 and 9 months.
Wow.
And she lived in a continuing care place, and she was playing bridge. I think she was at a bridge club, and they did it, 2-3 days a week, that type of thing. And she was sharp as a tack until probably the last 3 to 6 months. So, those little things do make a difference. I'm sure we all have our own stories where, we can kind of relate to that. But again, I just think it's kind of interesting that I feel like the goal is, getting to a position where you can retire as soon as you possibly can. And then if that is the case, how do you transition? It's not just, I'm retired, I'm done. And you got to figure out a purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good advice. It really is. I think of you, Andrew Wood, as being somebody you talk to about retirement planning and savings and investments and things like that. I never really thought about having this kind of conversation with you, and I'm glad we have, because you talk to a lot of folks who are already retired. You manage a lot of their accounts for people who are already retired to make sure that they can, keep on going as they can. And I imagine you see quite a bit of this.
Well, Rick, it is one question that I typically ask people when I especially first meet them. Obviously as we get into a conversation, but what does retirement look like? Can you envision what retirement looks like? And I don't just mean the vague kind of responses. I want to know, like, what specifically do you see yourself doing? Because I do think that is important to have a successful, healthy, retirement where you can enjoy yourself and have something to look forward to.
Yeah. Very nice, very nice. Well, I appreciate it, and this is the conversation today. Nothing technical about Social Security or savings or inflation or anything. This is great.
Well, again, thanks for having us, Rick.
I appreciate it. Andrew Wood with Dan White & Associates, financial planner specializing in retirement income. And on Sunday, listen to Dan as he brings you On the Money, 7 a.m. on Sundays here on 101.7 FM, 1150 a.m. WDEL, and streaming at WDEL.com.